All right, let's dive right back in. In our last explainer, we really got a handle on the time wage, seeing it as the form the value of labor power takes. Today, we're turning to chapter 21 of Capital to tackle what looks like a totally different beast, the piece wage. Our goal here is to peel back the curtain, deconstruct this thing, and really understand its true function and, honestly, its masterful role within the whole capitalist system. You know, on the surface, the piece wage looks like the fairest deal you could possibly get. You get paid for what you actually produce. The more you make, the more you earn. It makes intuitive sense, right? It seems to reward your individual effort directly. But, as we're about to find out, that very appearance of fairness is exactly what makes it such a powerful and masterful illusion. So let's just put these two side by side to see the apparent difference. With a time wage, it's simple. Payment is based on how long you work, by the hour, by the day. The piece wage, though, seems to throw time out the window completely. Now your payment is based on the quantity of stuff you produce, per item, per piece. This shift from time to output is the key thing we need to dig into. Is it really a new kind of wage, or is it just the same thing in a different disguise?
Okay, let's get to the real heart of the matter. How is the piece rate actually calculated? Because here's the spoiler. Despite all appearances, it has nothing to do with the value of the product itself. It's actually a disguised way of measuring the time spent making it.
So, how does a capitalist land on a price for a single piece? It's surprisingly simple, really. It's just a conversion. The starting point is always the normal average daily time wage for that line of work. Then, the capitalist figures out the average number of pieces a typical worker can crank out in a day. The final step? Just some simple division. You take that daily wage, divide it by the average daily output, and there you have it, the piece rate. Time is still the secret ingredient, the foundation it's all built on. Let's put some numbers on this to make it crystal clear. Let's say the average daily wage is $30, and the average worker produces 30 pieces in that day. The math is easy, right? 30 divided by 30 gives you $1 per piece. So for a worker who has average skill, who works at an average intensity, guess what? They still earn that same $30 daily wage. The form of the payment changed, but the actual substance, the price for a day's worth of their labor power, is exactly the same. And this right here, this is the core insight. The piece wage isn't some new, independent way of getting paid. It is simply the time wage that has been converted into a different phenomenal form. The worker thinks they're being paid for the product they made, but they are still fundamentally being paid for their time. It's just that their time is now being measured through their output. The form is an illusion. The substance hasn't changed a bit. So this brings up a really important question. If the piece wage is just a time wage in disguise, why do capitalists prefer it so much? I mean, why go through the trouble of converting it? Well, the answer lies in the incredible advantages this particular form offers for cranking up the intensity of labor and, of course, for extracting more surplus value. And you know, Marx himself nails it with this quote. He argues that with piece wages, the control mechanism is literally baked into the payment system. The form of the wage itself becomes the supervisor. It makes sure you work hard and it makes sure you work well because if a piece is defective, you don't get paid for it. Simple as that. So let's just tick off these advantages. First, you don't need as many supervisors walking around, which saves money. The worker has a huge personal incentive to work as hard and as fast as they can because every wasted minute is literally money out of their own pocket. Second, quality control is basically outsourced to the worker themselves. They're the ones who get penalized for mistakes. And finally, it gives the capitalist a perfect, exact measurement of how intense each worker's labor is. You immediately know who's above average, average, or below average. This chart really shows the dynamic perfectly. The capitalist sets the piece rate based on the average worker. So what does that mean? It means the highly skilled or extra intense worker, yeah, they can earn more than the daily value of their labor power. But it also means the below average worker will always earn less. And for the capitalist class as a whole, it all balances out. On average, they never pay more than that established daily value of labor power. And this has some really serious social consequences. The piece wage system automatically creates a pecking order among the workers. You get the high earners and the low earners. This creates intense competition, it pits workers against each other in a race to make more money, and that division, that lack of solidarity, ultimately serves the interests of capital. Now, the logic of piece wages can be taken to its most extreme and exploitative form in what Marx calls the sweating system. This is where a whole new layer of exploitation gets introduced, run by parasitic middlemen. So here's how this works. The main capitalist, the factory owner, doesn't even hire the workers directly. Instead, they subcontract the work out to a middleman, a contractor, and they agree on a certain piece rate. This middleman then goes out, finds the workers to do the job, but pays them an even lower piece rate and just pockets the difference. You can see right here how the exploitation just gets multiplied. The main capitalist is still extracting their surplus value from the whole process. But now you have this contractor, this middleman, who carves out their own profit. And that profit comes from one place, the difference between the rate they get and the lower rate they pay the actual worker. This system allows for the absolute maximum squeezing of the laborer, who is often stuck working in really isolated and unregulated conditions. But this logic doesn't just stop at the factory door. For our final section, we're going to see how the piece wage becomes an incredibly powerful tool for capital, not just locally, but on a global scale. To really get its global function, we need to be clear on this concept: the intensity of labor. This isn't just about how long you work. It's about the sheer amount of energy and effort you expend in a given period of time. A simple time wage is a bit clumsy at measuring that. It measures duration, but not how hard someone is working. The piece wage? It solves this problem beautifully. Because it measures output per unit of time, the piece wage makes intensity perfectly quantifiable. It becomes a universal measuring stick. A capitalist can now look at their spreadsheets and precisely compare the productivity of workers, not just in 2 different workshops across town, but in 2 different nations across the globe. This allows capital to hunt for the most intense and therefore most profitable labor anywhere in the world. And that brings us to our final, fascinating question. We've just unmasked the piece wage as another form of the time wage, but this opens up a much bigger issue. If all wages are just a mask for the price of labor power, how in the world do we account for the very real, very significant differences in wages between nations? What does that mean for the global system? Well, that is the exact question we're going to tackle in our next explainer on Chapter 22, National Differences of Wages.